So, around about a year ago I made a video on this channel, why Mayo haven't won an All-Ireland in 69 years. And I'll be honest, probably like most GAA fans across the country, I tried to answer the question that probably doesn't have a definitive answer. Why Mayo haven't reached the promised land in what will now be 70 years this coming summer, if Mayo aren't to achieve such a feat this year, of course. And obviously this is a very sensitive topic, a very tricky topic, something that doesn't get answered very easily. And the truth is, there probably isn't a collective answer. We can all clutch at straws and look at this reason or that reason, but the fact of the matter is they lost to the better team on each of those finals. Whatever way we want to spin it, and that is ultimately the truth and the sad reality for Mayo fans. And I know what you're thinking, here we go again, another video on Mayo and why they haven't won an All-Ireland in such a long time. But we aren't looking at the past in this video. Instead we're going to look at the future, and we're going to look at when it could happen, how it could happen, and how Mayo could eventually finally get over the line in the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. In this video I thought we would look at the future rather than the past, because ultimately we've been down that road too many times when it comes to discussing heatedly debated topics in the GAA. And I'll admit, I have probably been one of the main people in doing exactly that. I've certainly made my course of videos down the years looking at Mayo football, but ultimately those videos always tend to do very well and do tend to be very heavily requested by some of you lads. So I thought what we would do is have a look at what it could take for Mayo in 2021, 2022, or whatever year the championship does finally decide to return. Now I do want to point out first of all that I don't actually think Mayo will win the Sam Maguire in 2021 or even 2022 for that fact. But if James Horan's men were to mastermind Mayo's first All-Ireland in 70 years, here's what I think needs to happen. So I suppose first of all let's have a look briefly back at the 2020 All-Ireland Championship season for Mayo. First of all, a Connacht title and an All-Ireland final appearance in which they held the all-conquering Dubs up until the final water break. It may not be considered a success for Mayo since they did lose the final, but they can at least hold their heads high in comparison to the likes of Kerry, Donegal and Galway. Each were expected to be the team to at least give the Dubs a challenge that year, but of course failed miserably in their own province. And it is fair to say that Mayo did overachieve in many ways in the 2020 Senior Football Championship compared to the players that they did actually have. Obviously they had a lot of very young players who came into the side, the likes of Oisin Mullen, Tommy Conroy, Ryan O'Donoghue, Mark Mourin for example, and they did all very much overachieve for Mayo in getting them to an All-Ireland final. Now I'm not saying they overachieved in terms of those players actually weren't good enough, but just in comparison to a lot of other counties they done a very good job indeed. And I do think that Mayo's overall All-Ireland Championship season can be considered a success, because ultimately I don't think this Mayo team should be compared or given in the same light as some of the other Mayo teams that have lost in All-Ireland finals, because ultimately a lot of these players were playing in their first ever All-Ireland final. So what needs to happen for Mayo to finally win the All-Ireland and break the curse? Well, ultimately they need to stop Dublin first of all, and Dublin are obviously streets ahead of everyone pretty much in the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship at the moment. Dublin have won 6 Senior Football Championships in a row and are going to take some stopping in terms of ending that reign as champions of the country. Developing such a game plan to beat the Dubs would require very much another video, in all honesty. Only Jim McGuinness in the past 7 to 8 years has been able to come up with such a plan to beat the Dubs. And ultimately what I do honestly believe is that at some stage over the next 4 to 5 years they will eventually have to slow down. They won't be as good year on year out to continuously win All-Irelands, to continuously be as good as they will. So there will come a stage where they will be caught. Can it be Mayo? Can Mayo be the team to finally catch them? Can Mayo be the one to catch them with cold feet? It's honestly hard to know, and I honestly don't think the gap between Dublin and the rest of the country is as big as what everyone thinks. When you look at the 2020 Senior Football Championship, Dublin, the only Division 1 teams Dublin actually played were both sides that were relegated from Division 1. They never actually played a side who weren't relegated from Division 1 in the Senior Football Championship. And obviously all of this is external. Mayo cannot control how good Dublin will be. They cannot control how good Dublin will be in the next coming years and what players they will add to the team and how much they will grow, expand, etc, etc. Mayo can only control what they can control. So they can only control what is on the pitch, they can only control the elements that are around them, and they cannot control how good good Dublin can be. So let's look at what Mayo can change, and let's look at some improvements they could make in terms of trying to end that wait for an elusive All-Ireland title. So the first thing that Mayo need to do, in my opinion, is utilise the bench more. Now this is a tricky one in some ways, because you do have to feel a bit sorry for James Horan and, well, anyone playing senior intercounty football at the minute. A lack of pre-season tournaments, league games and any GAA activity at all that doesn't involve the senior championship means it's far more risky to try unused players in all or nothing championship games. In the All-Ireland final against Dublin, Mayo's two attacking subs in the second half were James Carr and Stephen Cohen. Now both did get involved, and having watched the game back, Stephen Cohen did get into some good attacking positions, kicked a point and did create a lot more scoring opportunities than Ryan O'Donoghue in the second half, at least anyways. But I can't help but think, however, there may have been better options than the ones Mayo went for. Knockmore's Darren McHale was the top scorer in the 2020 Mayo Senior Football Championship, playing a vital role in Knockmore's first senior county title in 23 years. Whilst Darren has featured briefly in the senior panel in the past and not shot the lights out in particular, he was an unused substitute in the All-Ireland final, a time when Mayo could have needed someone like him in that moment. In fact, Darren was the only one of the Knockmore lads to even be in the panel, which to me was a bit of a surprise. And yes, Knockmore do have a lot of very young players, and a lot of those players probably aren't up to full speed just yet to be in the Mayo Senior Football panel, but at the same time I would have certainly expected one or two others to maybe be in with a shout. Conor O'Shea for me is another, the often forgotten one of the O'Shea brothers, who similarly to Darren McHale has never really caught the eye, but just like Darren was one of the standout players in the 2020 Mayo Senior Football Championship. Mark Mourin was another who produced a dream senior debut in a 15-point win over Galway in the first game after the lockdowns, and although he never quite hit them same levels again, it was surprising to not see him come on to have a crack at the Dubs for the final 10 minutes. Second of all is more use of the young players. Now realistically, Mayo for me just need to continue what they were doing in the 2020 Senior Football Championship, in I suppose in preparation to the Senior Football Championship, which was obviously giving a lot of the young players time, bringing a lot of the young players through. Now obviously again, the pre-season tournaments and the lack of playing time for young players has been a massive hindrance, but now is the time Mayo need to back them and bring them into the team. Chris Barrett, Keith Higgins, Shamie O'Shea and David Clark all retired, meaning there is more space for more young players to come into the team. The goalkeeping situation, first of all, is an interesting one. Will James Horan turn to a familiar face in Robert Henley, or will he bleed new life into the team like James McNicholas, for example, who played in goal in the Connacht under-20 final well over a year ago? Could we see defenders like David McBride, Luke Tunney and Jack Coyne come into the side? It remains to be seen what James Horan will have in store for this Mayo team. Obviously the lack of game time makes it hard to know what Mayo players will be at the forefront for Mayo in 2021, but I've no doubt that new life in the team will add to the threat of this new look Mayo team that consisted the likes of the 2020 Young Footballer of the Year, Oisin Mullen, to name a few. It may be the case of taking a step backwards before taking a step forwards, and perhaps their National League form may take the brunt of it, but in the long term it could hold the key to that eventual All-Ireland success. And I think something else that Mayo need to do, in my opinion, is just have a bit more belief in the closing minutes of those All-Ireland finals. Look, listen, I know in the closing 10 to 15 minutes you can have mental fatigue, you can be physically exhausted off your feet, and when you're playing a side like Dublin, it's very, very hard to keep your composure in those final 10 to 15 minutes, and it's very difficult indeed to keep up with Dublin, let alone stick with them for the final 10 to 15 minutes. And look, listen, I think if Mayo play the same way they did throughout the entirety of 2020, where they played without fear and pressure, and keep that same momentum in the closing minutes of an All-Ireland final, there might only be 1 or 2 points in it, and then you just never know. Obviously it is a different kettle of fish playing Dublin every year, and there's not many that can beat them, but if you can stick with them and be patient in those moments, like what I was saying before, at some point over the next couple of years the Dubs will surely have an off day. Mayo just have to be there to capitalise on it. It's all if, buts and maybes, and the truth is not one of us can predict the future, and I'm not claiming to be any genius of any sort, but I do think if some of these things that we just discussed happen, they will get over the line sooner rather than later. Whether that happens or not, only time will tell. So ultimately, when will Mayo eventually break the duck and win the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship? I don't think anyone can predict that. I don't think anyone can make an accurate assumption on as when that will actually happen. Ultimately, I'm sure they'll come close over the next couple of years. I'm sure they'll keep striving. I'm sure they'll continuously be bringing through some young talents and get closer and closer towards eventually winning that All-Ireland success. I do feel confident enough that they can do it in this decade, but I guess only time will tell in regards to that, as not me or anyone watching this video can ultimately predict the future, so we'll have to wait and see. lately. To anyone who did tune in, do leave a like and subscribe. I do appreciate it. Stay tuned for more videos coming soon, and have a lovely week.